So we begin with the core aspect of self-inquiry in these few verses. We'll see starting this verse 23. So I'll read the verse. நான் என்று இத்தேகம் நவிலாது உறக்கத்தும் நான் இன்று என்று ஆறும் நவில்வதில்லை. நான் ஒன்று எழுந்த பின் எல்லாம் எழும் இந்த நான் எங்கு எழும் என்று நுண்மதியால் என். So the meaning is, the body is insentient and it does not say I. And no one says, when I am asleep, I do not exist. After the I rises, all else rise. When one investigates with a keen intellect from where this I rises, it will disappear. So this verse now directly starts pointing to what has been hinted all along. So we have so far in the last 22 verses, which was called broadly as discernment, viveka, which is to point out all the false ways in which we take ourselves to be. So we saw the whole thing we summarized last time, in fact, briefly, that ideas of philosophies and religions and time and space and fate and free will and everything comes about because we identify with the body and mind. And therefore, they were all essentially negated, which is discrimination or discernment. Viveka means, it's called as Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. So Nitya means that which is eternal. Anitya means that which is temporary, impermanent. So discerning between the two is Viveka. So that's what was the topic of the last 22 verses, even though, as we said, discernment leads to inquiry. So it is not ever decoupled. One of the things the mind always does is it always wants to make it a step-by-step process. But the reality is there is no steps involved. As someone said beautifully, the first step is the last step, because the moment we recognize it, we are already abiding in the truth. So the whole purpose of this work, or the whole purpose of any teaching, is to simply abide in the truth we have already glimpsed into. So the good example that's given is if the sun is covered by cloud and the sun is revealed because the cloud is cleared, and the clouds again cover and the sun again comes out, it's not a new sun that's coming out. It's the same sun. There may be repeated instances of clouds covering and removing until it becomes a clear sky and there are no clouds, right? But all along the sun is the same. The sun didn't change between the day when it was overcast and when it is sunny. Similarly, the first step is the last step. The moment we glimpse into our true being, which is free of all the identifications of body and mind and all the rest we talked about, that very glimpse is the same glimpse we get all through. But the more we abide in it, it becomes the clear sun. The constant covering up due to clouds goes away, and then the sun reveals itself in its full glory. So therefore, the important thing to recognize is that which is available here and now has no distance, therefore. No time involved, no space involved. See, the moment we are talking of steps and we are talking of journey and all the rest, that's all possible in time and space. But here we are pointing to that which is ever present. So the important thing is to recognize it, and because the power of the mind is to go outward constantly, we have to keep coming back to it. So that is the repetition needed. That can be called a practice, but it's not practice in the sense of acquiring anything new. It is practice in the sense of discarding the false repeatedly until the false loses its hold. So, in any case, why that's important is to recognize that Viveka and Vichara are not different ultimately. Viveka is Vichara, Vichara is Viveka. Viveka means discernment, Vichara is inquiry. And yet the emphasis can be different. So when the false has got up, so that's why the beautiful structure of this work is first Viveka is given, because initially the hold of the false is strong. So we went through all these things, questions around fate and free will, time and space, whether whether the Trinity is real or not, whether is there a creator and is the creator separate from the created, um, what is knowledge, what is ignorance, all of these questions were all resolved. And now we come to the core of inquiry, which is to recognize our true self directly. So there he says, "Non endri teham naviladu." So the body never says I, right? So it's a very simple pointer. Whenever we identify with the body, it is an identification that is rising because we take ourselves to be the body. And here the word body means, of course, everything. It's not just the physical body, but the energy, the mind, the intellect. So one of the important things always to remember is body is all the koshas, all the sheets. That way we'll not get confused about it. Body means body mind. And the body mind, the mind also, see, whenever a thought comes, the thought doesn't say I. There's just thought. The prana doesn't say I. There is just prana, there is energy. There is, let's say there is good digestion, or suddenly there is bad. It's all just a process, right? It's a happening. Uh, as I believe Buddha said, there is, he said very nicely, he said, there is thoughts, no thinker thereof. There is words, no speaker thereof. And there is deeds, no doer thereof. So that's the direct, clear understanding. There is similarly prana is there. I say I am having a great metabolism. No, there is great metabolism. There is no I having the great metabolism, or I am having a bad metabolism. Similarly with the body, similarly with the mind, similarly with the intellect. Right? So everything is just an expression of nature, Prakriti. That's why Krishna says in the Gita that everything is done by Prakriti. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. Everything is done by the three modes of nature, whether it's the body, the energy, the mind, the intellect. Only the Krishna uses a very strong expression. Only the fool thinks I am the doer. Ahankara vimudhatma karta hamiti manyate. Vimudha means the fool, the ignorant. The same word used by Shankara and Bhajagovindam. He says, Bhajagovindam, Bhajagovindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudhamate. He says, only because of foolishness, ignorance, we tend to associate with the body, with the mind, with the intellect as I. But here, as he says, the body never says I. The energy, none of that says I. So, nanendri teham naviladu. And at the same time, our existence is continuous, right? So, that's why he says, even all through, we don't ever feel I don't exist. Even during deep sleep, there is the sense of existence, not as the conscious wakeful existence, but there is the presence. There is something that is there which feels as peace, which feels as um, total quietness there. And when we wake up, there is the apparently individuated existence, as you said. So, all through there is existence, through wakefulness, through dream, and through deep sleep. But what comes and goes in those states are different things. The body in the wakeful state is different from the body in the dream state. As we saw the story of Janaka, one can have diametrically opposite experiences between wakefulness and dream in the same day, and yet the same sense of existence underlies both. So that's why he says everything rises because I rises. நான் ஒன்று எழுந்த பின் எல்லாம் எழும். Everything rises because I rises. So if I don't rise, the sense of existence as I am, then nothing rises. And again, the example of that is deep sleep. When we are in deep sleep, when we are in swoon, when we are put under an anesthetic, when someone is in coma, there is no perception of the world. There is absolutely nothing. What is there cannot be spoken of. There is the unmanifest ground of existence itself. And that is why there is the sense of peace and all that. But consciously, there is nothing. So, everything, time, space, the body, the mind, people, the whole world, samsara as it's called, is all coming forth because there is I. Once the sense I am rises, then everything rises. That's why he says, when one investigates where from the I rises, the I will disappear. Because we are associating the I with all of these things that are rising. Right? As we already said, that's why there is the same thread continues. Even though we call that Viveka, this is Vichara, it's the same thread. The when we investigate where the I is coming from keenly, that is to say, what is the sense of I that I am taking myself to be? So I am taking myself to be the body, let's say, or the mind, or the relationships I have, or the career I have, or this or that. When I look at all of this carefully, I notice that all of these exist only because I exist. And their existence is dependent on the ground of existence that I am. They come and go, I am here. So therefore, I have placed, or rather superimposed, the sense of I on some identities and taken them to be me. That is the core delusion or ignorance we have. That is why Krishna says vimudha. So that ignorance is what causes suffering. When I am superimposing the sense of I on prakriti, nature. So because the body is part of nature, mind, intellect is part of nature, and the roles it takes are the same. It's in another verse he says it's guna interacting with guna. So when there are two people interacting, it is just the two minds interacting, two bodies interacting. The self is the sense of existence is not interacting. It's just stable. It's just same. There is no high and low for the sense of existence. There is absolutely no change. There is no coming and going. It's just remaining still and steady. What changes is the activity of the body and the activity of the mind in relationship to other bodies and other minds and other objects, events, and all of that. So, if what we do is we wrongly associate I with all of that. So, we say again, I am disturbed, I am happy, I am sad, I am miserable, I am excited, all of this. When we recognize that all of these are only activities of the body mind in relationship to other body mind or other objects, events, all of that, the sense of existence is always even. So, equanimity is not therefore a quality to be attained, it is ever present, it just has to be realized. So, if we say I have to be equanimous, that's another goal I'm putting, but that's not equanimity. That is an ideal that is projected by the mind. True equanimity is existence itself. So, when I recognize that my very existence is equanimous all the time, it is only the body and the mind that goes through ups and downs, then I remain free of the turbulence of the body and mind. And then the body and mind falls in its own place. It has more endurance and it takes care of itself and it has its limits, of course. So, extremes of anything, whether it's temperature or whether it's events or happiness and sadness, all of these are handled with grace because the sense of existence is not affected by it. And as long as I am grounded as I am, then the body mind falls into its right place. So that is true equanimity, samatvam. That is yoga. Krishna says samatvam yoga uchyate. So yoga is to remain equanimous. And that equanimity is by removing the false sense of I. So beautifully, Prahlad defines in Bhagavatam, Bija Nirharanam Yoga. So he says, removing the seed of ignorance is yoga. Bija means seed. Nirharana means to remove it. So Prahalad says removing the seed of ignorance is yoga. Krishna says equanimity is yoga. Both are beautifully defining the same. Because it's the ignorance that causes movement away from equanimity, turbulence. So if you remove the seed of ignorance, then equanimity is your natural state. So that is yoga. So here also what Ramana Maharshi points to is, therefore, your very sense of existence is always free. We are associating that with false ideas, ideologies, physical, mental, emotional, intellectual, then national, religious, racial, so many identities we project and we get caught in it. And you see that everything, starting from a dispute between within a family to countries to religions, all of this is because of only one factor, which is false identification. So problems are many, but the root is one, which is the ego. That's why if we recognize this much, then we are free, that our problems are also coming forth because of that. Whatever we think as the body may have problems or not, the mind may have some problems because, let's say, there is something to deal with, and so the mind may have to deal with it. There is a problem, but you are not affected by the problem. You as the pure being is ever free. And when you are grounded in that you are ever full, ever content, ever free, you are the Satchit Ananda that is abiding in the heart as I am. So then all these other activities and all these other turbulences don't affect us. So the whole process of, whether it's, we call it jnana or bhakti, both are one and the same, is to devote to that pure being within our heart, which is the presence of God. So in so many verses in the Gita too, Krishna says the same thing. He says, Sarvasya chaham hridisannivishtu attasmritir jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo vedantakrit veda videva chaham. Beautiful verse, 15th chapter. He says, in everyone's heart I abide in their heart as their very sense of existence. And from me comes forth knowledge, memory, forgetfulness, everything. And Vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo. Therefore, all of the Vedas are meant to only know me, which is the true sense of being within as Krishna. Vedanta krit veda videva chaham. So I am the knower of all Vedas and Vedanta. And I am the author of Vedanta, Vedanta krit. So who is the author of Vedanta? The very presence in our heart as pure being. Because what is Vedanta? Vedanta means the ending of knowledge. See, literally speaking, Veda means knowledge. Anta means end. So one way to look at it is it is the most supreme knowledge. But another literal way to take it, which is also very true, is it's the ending of knowledge. Because as Ramana Maharshi pointed out, the duality of knowledge and ignorance ends when this wisdom wakes up. So as long as there is duality of knowledge and ignorance, there is the sense of knower. And when there is a knower, he is also the ignorant at the same time. Because I can only know finite amount of things. The moment there is knowledge, there is ignorance. There is no way to avoid it, right? Because if I know X, there is not X that I don't know. It's simple. And the X is never going to be complete. So the whole point of Vedanta is to get out of that X not X duality, known and unknown, by recognizing that that which is underlying both known and unknown is the source of everything. And that is Bhagavan. So when Krishna says, I am the author of Vedanta, I am the subject of all Vedas, I am the presence in the hearts of all of that points to that true divine presence in our heart, which alone illuminates everything, without which there is nothing. So there is no I other than Him. It is He who shines as I, to look at it in a different way. It is Bhagavan who shines as I in each one's heart. And that sense of it is the same example we gave in the last session. It is the sun that shines as a reflection in every pot. Let's say there are 1,000,000 pots of water, and every pot of water has the sun reflected in it. All of them are nothing but the one sun in the sky. The sun is one, but it seems like millions. And the millions of suns are nothing but the same sun reflected, apparently individuated in each pot. So when Krishna says, I am the presence in each one's heart, we can literally see how the same pure being is reflected in everyone's heart as the sense of existence. And when that sense of existence is traced to its very source, it is the pure one being, which is all there is. So that is the whole process of self-inquiry, is to go from, we can take that metaphor, if there is a pot of water, we first identify with the water. And the water is dirty or clean, the water is shaking, it's calm, it's yellow color. I mean, you can color the water. I mean, there's so many qualities the water can take. It can be good smelling, bad smelling, right? But if you recognize that the sun in the water is absolutely unaffected by any of this that's happening, that's the reflection of the sun. And that's the sense of existence in my heart as I am. And where is this coming from? That is the very source, the absolute unmanifest pure being who is Bhagavan. So it is Bhagavan as the absolute who is reflected in everyone's heart as I am. So if we stay as the I am, then that reveals to us the source of the I am, which is pure being. So that's why he says, Nun Madhyal, by keenly inquiring and abiding as the source, we recognize the falsity of associating with other objects and the truth of our existence as the supreme essence of Bhagavan. And that is true Advaita. Advaita is therefore not to make any assertion or affirmation, but to lose oneself completely. So as we saw in the previous verse, emptying oneself of all false ideas leaves us with nothing else but just a sense of existence. And that sense of existence is Bhagavan. And therefore, all there is Bhagavan. Verse 24. ஜட உடல் நான் எண்ணாது சச்சித்து உதியாது உடலளவா நான் என் ஒன்று உதிக்கும் இடையில் இது சச்சித் சட கிரந்தி பந்தம் ஜீவன் நுட்பமை அகந்தை இது சம்சாரம் மனம் எண். So he says, Jadamahi Udal. So the insentient body, again, the body which is matter, does not say I. So that's again repeated. Last time also we saw the same in the previous verse. But the other thing he adds here is the eternal awareness does not come and go. So what comes and goes in between is he says, is the thought of I. And that thought of I is the knot between matter and awareness. And this causes bondage. It is called jiva, it is called the subtle body, it's called ego, it's called the mind, it's called all of that. So it is the false association of the sense of existence with the attributes of body and mind, which is called the ego. So in Sanskrit we have two words beautifully, that's why ahankara, ahambhava. Ahamkara means the ego, the false association with the body mind. That's why Krishna says ahankara vimudhatma. So ahankara means we are ignorant. But if we dissociate from the body mind, then it remains as aham bhava, just the feeling aham. Bhava means feeling, the pure sense of existence, I am. So the process of inquiry therefore is to go from ahankara to aham bhava. And aham bhava then is seen as a reflection of the supreme being, the same supreme essence reflected in everyone's heart as aham bhava. So the I am is the I thought, which is the pure sense of I am, is the doorway to the supreme, because when it's decoupled from all of the false associations, I am the body, I am the mind, I am this, I am that, then what remains is just the I thought, and it cannot remain by itself. In fact, the next verse points out that the pure I, when it is removed from associating with the body, then it subsides in its source. See, because the nature of I is to associate with the body or the mind and claim as ego. But when it is not associating with the body or mind, then what remains is just the pure I, the sense of existence, which may seem individuated, but when we really go deep within it, so that is why it is important to abide in it. See, when we decouple all the thoughts, as we already pointed out, we recognize that the body changes, that's not I, the prana is not I, the mind is not I, the intellect is not I. When we negate everything, then we come to the very sense of existence. And it may feel, as you pointed out, it may feel individuated, right? But we just stay with it, and you will recognize that at some point there is nothing there except just the sense of presence. And the deeper we go into the sense of presence, it is nothing but tracing back to the very source from which the presence itself rises, which is devoid of that apparent individuation. So that is all there is to go from associating with the body mind to having a sense of existence that's free of the body mind to the pure being, which is completely free, which is non differentiated to anyone. And in a loose sense, we can see those three as three levels of Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, and Advaita. We'll talk about it more later. But when you are caught in the body mind, there is Dvaita. Because you are associated with the body as I, the mind as I, and there is multiplicity, right? There is many, because the body mind is obviously separate. My body mind, your body mind, this and that. That is Dvaita, duality. And in that state, devotion is useful. That's why Dvaita is about bhakti. So then I conceive God as the creator of all these body minds, and I worship him, and that removes the attachment and brings forth a sense of surrender. So that is at the level of body mind, which is Dvaita. Vishishta Dvaita, we can say, is the recognition of the pure sense of existence that is dissociated from the body mind and yet feels individuated, and therefore it is part of the Supreme. Because there is a sense that you are part of the divine presence, but you are not the whole. So there is the pure presence in the heart, which is the Atma, and there is the Paramatma, or the Supreme Self, which is taking the same example. The sun in the sky is the Supreme Self, and the sun reflected in each part is the Jivatma. And the water is the body, the Jiva. So as long as you are identified with the body and the mind, you are taking yourself to be the water, the pot. Then there is duality, because there is many pots, many water. The moment you go to the sense of the light reflected in the water as the sunlight, then you have already come to Vishishta Advaita, which is you are part of the same. It's still a reflection, but it's all the same. It is one who appears as many. Vishishta means special or qualified. Advaita, Vishishta Advaita. So it's non-dual. There is no two. There's only one, but it seems to be many. So you're part of that. But you trace it back to the very source, then there is Advaita. There is complete non-duality, because there's only one. So that's the way you could trace the three philosophies that are very popular. So it's all three are valid in their own way. So all the activities that, as pointed out, when Hanuman, there is a famous verse where when you take yourself to be the body mind, then you can be a servant of the Lord, because you are in that sense of duality. Then when you take yourself to be that presence in the heart, then you're part of God. But when you completely lose yourself, it's not that you become God. That's the way people say it, and that's exactly wrong because there's no becoming here. When you completely lose yourself, then there is only that which is God. So, as the nice example sometimes given of how the moth goes and loses itself in the flame and becomes the flame. It's not that the moth became the flame, it's just that the flame is all there is. So, similarly, one by losing oneself apparently becomes, but there is no becoming. It is only being because it is always there. The false sense of separation is lost in the beloved, in the eternal divine. So that's why in this verse, Ramana Maharshi says that that false sense is called the Chit Jada Granthi. Granthi means knot. Chit is consciousness, Jada is insentience. So the Granthi, the knot between the sentient and the insentient, is what is the problem we have. Because the body itself is not a problem. As already pointed out many times, the body never says I, the body never says anything, right? The body, when it dies gracefully. Uh, the same with the brain cells, the same with the energy, everything. The pure awareness has no problem because it's just there. But there is someone in between the two who pretends to exist. And that pretentious entity is called as ego. That's why he doesn't exist actually, but it seems to exist. And that's why it's called Chit Jada Granthi, the knot between sentience and insentience. Also called Bandham. He's called as Bandham because he's bondage. That is the bondage. There is no bondage for the body. There is no bondage for awareness. The bondage is only for this imaginary entity. That is called Jiva. That bondage. That um, false association. Right. So as we say with the same example, the identification of the reflected sun with the water is Jiva. The pure reflected sun is Jivatma. And the sun is Paramatma, which is actually non-different from Jivatma. So that's the whole pointer of Advaita, is that there is only ultimately the one true pure sun of being, which seems to be appearing as many in the hearts of all, which in reality doesn't exist, but it's only an apparent existence. And that seems to get identified with the multitude. And therefore, when we recognize all of this, then all there is only Bhagavan. And the beauty of this is we can see this even from the perspective of devotion. If you recognize that everything is an expression of Bhagavan, including that ignorance, then we are free, really. Because what is, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks from all three levels. We spoke of three levels: the absolute one being, the sense of existence in everyone's heart, and the body, mind, and its activities. So the body, mind, and its activities are also coming forth from the same intelligence, which is the divine. The presence in the heart as I am is again coming forth from the same source, which is the supreme. And the source of it all is again the supreme being. So if we surrender completely, it gives us the same realization, because it's all only the divine who appears as multitudinal body and mind and objects and places and things. He appears as the conscious presence in everyone's heart, and he is the only source of everything which alone exists ultimately. So he is the, to use Gita's terms, he is Kshara, Akshara, and Purushottama. All three. Kshara means that which comes and goes, which which is the body, mind, and all. Akshara is the presence in the heart, as I am, and Purushottama is that which is the source of everything. So all three is what, so Krishna, that's why he says, I am all of it. So if you recognize this, then all that is there is Bhagavan. And therefore, in this verse, we see how that recognition can come through if we realize that the root of our ignorance is because we take ourselves to be the knot between sentient and the insentient. When we take ourselves to be the I associated with the body or the mind or any of the faculties of the Prakriti of nature, then we are caught in ignorance. When we free ourselves of these identifications and remain as the pure I, as the sense of existence, already we are free. And when we abide in that sense of existence, then we recognize that that is actually non-different from the pure being which comes and goes in every body as the sense of existence. So even in deep sleep, for example, when that conscious sense of presence is not felt, what is there is the unmanifest source from which everything comes, which is felt as peace. So we can never go consciously to experience the peace of deep sleep unless we recognize this truth that our very conscious presence comes forth from that, and when we abide in that, then it takes us to the same peace which is felt in deep sleep, when the sense of individuation is lost in that pure presence, pure beingness. Otherwise, we have all these problems. So he says here beautifully, that's why every sense of adharma comes forth from this false knot. So when we talk of anger, envy, greed, sadness, impermanence, burglary, murder, everything, he says, so whatever it might be, any negative quality comes forth only because of the false identification. So that's why dharma is not something to be acquired, but to be realized. If we realize our true nature, that is dharma. That's why later in another verse he says, true dharma, true jnana, true bhakti, true yajna is all only one thing, which is to recognize our true self. If we are not recognizing our true self as divine, then we will only be caught in partial dharma and we will be tempted to adharma. And as he says here, all these things will be available or one will be prone to them, let's say, if we are not rooted in it. So the whole purpose of this inquiry is to surrender, therefore, completely to the divine within us, and thereby lose the false sense of separate existence as I am this body, I am this mind, and all of that, and thereby remove the seed of ignorance. As Prahalad said, Bija Nirharanam. Then the seed of ignorance is gone. Then the seed of suffering, the seed of envy, the seed of anger, all of that is taken out in one way, one shot. Otherwise, we can have 10 different ideals and it always becomes problematic to say, even to a child. That's why when we say you should not do this, you should not do that, it becomes very difficult. But if you go to the very root of why you are doing it and understand the root cause, then you are able to solve this. So the root cause of all problems is the egoic identification. So the whole purpose of spiritual wisdom, of true spiritual wisdom, of the highest teaching of great sages, of Ramana Maharshi here, is to recognize that our true nature is free of the ego even now. And therefore, we can then act out of that pure nature with love and with peace and with dharma. So we'll see one last verse, which already we alluded to. So the verse is, Urupatri undam, Urupatri nirkum, Urupatri undumiga ongum, உருவிட்டு உருப்பற்றும் தேடினால் ஓட்டம் பிடிக்கும் உருவற்ற பேய் அகந்தை ஓர். He says, holding a form, it rises, holding a form, it stays, holding and feeding on a form, it thrives. Leaving one form, it takes another form. When sought, it takes to flight. Such is the ghost called ego, with no form of its own. It's a beautiful and a very evocative verse. So the ego is compared to a ghost because the ego, as we said, always is identified with a form, right? The pure sense of I am, only when it identifies with something, becomes the ego. The I thought becomes the ego upon identification. So when we say I am the body, then ego develops, right? Because then if I praise how you are looking, then you may feel good. If I say something negative about it, you feel bad. If you identify with the mind, then again, same problem. If you identify with the intellect, if you identify with your family, if I say something bad about your son, you may feel bad because you are identified with your son as I. Or if I insult your country, you may feel bad if because you. So the form here, that's why it's important. Urupatri undam. It is only because it identifies with a form. Form doesn't have to be physical. It can be mental. It can be an idea. It can be an ideology. I can say I'm a communist, and that's a identification. Or I'm a capitalist, or I'm a this religious person, that religious person, or I'm this nationalist, that. Any form the ego identifies with is the way it survives. So you can pretend, one can pretend to be very selfless and say I'm identified with some great cause. Then that cause becomes the form in which the ego lives. So I can say I'm an environmentalist. That's another form the ego has taken. So one can take, I'm a very charitable person. So that's another subtle form the ego takes. So the ego is like a ghost. That's why beautifully says because Ramana Maharshi says, just as a ghost is so elusive, this ego is so elusive. It takes so many forms. It will take a very pious form. I am a devotee. That is another great form the ego takes. That's another form the ego takes and says, I am a devotee, or I am a sadhaka. So many ways in which the ego can hide itself in a very pious way or in a very sattvic way, and sometimes in a very tamasic way, rajasic way, and all of that. So the whole pointer here is ego cannot be alone because it is a ghost. So a ghost cannot live without a body. So the ghost always takes on a body, and the body is form. Form can be physical or mental, abstract, any of that. But once the form is removed, then the ego cannot live. So that is why the whole pointer is already given in the previous verses. You can see how a beautiful thread is maintained all through this work by Ramana Maharshi, but coming at it in all the ways possible. So here the pointer is, if you remove all forms from the ego, then the ego is actually pure being. It is not that there is something called the ego that you have to slay or something like that. It is just that one has to remove the attachment with forms. And the attachment with forms, when it's removed, then there is no such thing as ego. So he gives a simple, colorful example too, where he says sometimes there is a wedding crasher. Someone comes into a wedding and says, I'm the friend of the bridegroom or relative of the bridegroom, and he eats all the good food. And this family thinks he's from the bride's family, and the bride's family thinks he's from this family. But after some time, someone starts doubting, who's this fellow? And when they start looking, then he immediately takes flight because he knows he cannot withstand the inquiry. So he says ego is like that. The ego hides by pretending to be something, and it cannot stand the scrutiny of our true inquiry. And we find out where is this ego, it's not there because we are falsely identifying with the body. But to look at the body, as we said already, the body is free of any sense of I. The nation doesn't say, be my patriot, or the everything is just there. It is just that there is a false, as we saw in the last verse, chit jadagranthi. There is a false knot between the sentient and the insentient. Everything is insentient. We think we create a sense of purpose that I have to serve this cause or that cause, I have to do this or do that. And we create this knot. When we look carefully, where is this? Nobody asked you to do that. And you are already free as you are. And your very sense of existence is never touched by any of this. So the false knot, which is unseen and therefore thriving as this, like a wedding crasher, when it is inquired, then it's gone. Because there is no actual ego. There is only the imaginary identification with form. I think I am XYZ, whatever it might be. Even the very physical body, as we said, starting with that, the body never says I. The body never has any sense of egoic or identification. It's a very graceful entity. It's functioning beautifully. It knows when it's hungry. It knows when it's full. It's a beautiful, intelligent organism. But I superimpose on top of it to use it for my pleasure seeking or whatever. Same is true with the mind. Mind is a faculty. The ability to think is by itself not a problem. But I am identified with many things and therefore I am thinking about unnecessary things and so on. And same is true with all the other concepts, whatever it is, right? So one can free by uncomplicating our lives in all these ways, by recognizing that all of this is just because of the unexamined life of egoic existence. It is said that it just occurs to me, Socrates once famously said, an unexamined life is not worth living. So it's a very nice statement. So that's what we do. We live an unexamined life, and that's not a life worth living, because when we are living unexamined, we take ourselves to be the ego, and then we are caught in attachment. Then we are worried constantly, oh, what will he do without me? What will they do without me? Everybody will do whatever they are meant to do. Nobody is indispensable. You just do your part and that's it, right? I mean, and the part you have to do will be done anyway. So the point is, you recognize that everything happens perfectly. Then whatever is meant to be done also happens perfectly. It doesn't mean that once becomes completely inactive or anything, because the body is functioning, it has its own intelligence, the mind has its own, in fact it functions perfectly, because then you eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, you engage in activities that you are naturally drawn to from the body mind perspective, and because there is no sense of division, that activity is offered as service to everyone. Whatever you can do is offered as service to the larger society or to the world, and your very existence, that's why the sage says the very existence of a sage is service, because Ramana Maharshi says that's why your greatest service is self-realization, because when we realize our true self, that is the greatest service we can offer. Then our very existence can be of service to others. Otherwise, we think we are serving, and we will develop an ego out of that serving too, and in the end we are not serving anyone except our own ego. So that's the reason why one has to, if one is interested in truly serving, then that's only because of, only through this recognition. We'll actually see one last verse, because that ends this section on the first section on inquiry, then the new section begins. It's a short verse. Last verse we'll see. Ahandai undayin anaithum undahum, அகந்தை என்றேல் இன்று அனைத்தும் அகந்தையே யாவுமாம் ஆதலால் யாது இது என்று நாடலே ஓவுதல் யாவும் என ஓர். So it's actually a re-emphasis of all the verses before. So that's why it's a short verse relatively. All it says here is, when the ego rises, everything rises with it. When the ego is not, there is nothing else. Since the ego is everything, to question what is this thing is the extinction of the ego. So, as we already, this has been said before, that everything is because of the ego. So, it's only because of the false identification that everything rises. And therefore, everything, whether it be ideas around philosophies, around religious identification, around discussions about fate and free will, as we said, or around arguments about what is true knowledge, what is true devotion, debates between philosophies, whether time is real, whether space is real, all of this come about only because of the ego. The sense of existence first rises, and when it identifies with the body and mind only, everything else is created. Time is created. See, because when we again sit in silence, even in meditation, when we do not have any thought, when we do not have any association with anything, and we simply remain silent in our conscious presence, there is no time there. Right? There is no sense of whether it's morning or evening. You can actually be in that, and then you can sometimes come out, and you, when we see the outer world, we can recognize the time. But the very pure sense of existence, devoid of associating with body and mind, has no time, no space, and therefore no world. There is nothing except pure sense of existence. So everything, this way it says, it's not like some exaggeration. It's literally agandai undel anaithum undagum, means everything comes forth because ego comes. That is, as the last verse to connect it, only when form comes, everything comes. The pure sense of I, when it's associated with form, then I am rooting myself in this form, then I am in this place, then there is this time, then I am in this year, then there is this setting, and then there is everything that comes out. When we therefore dissolve the false identification, as we said before, by inquiring and decoupling the sense of I from identifying with anything, and it remains as pure sense of I, aham aham iti sakshat atma rupena bhati, Ramana Maharshi says, then it simply shines as I in the heart. And when we remain as that pure sense of I, that is our true essence, which is Brahman. But when it gets identified with the form, then it becomes samsara. So that's why he says, because everything comes forth from the ego, to inquire into the source of the ego is the extinction of everything. So when we inquire into where is this ego coming from, as we already saw, the ego doesn't exist. It's like the wedding crasher, he runs away, because in reality, it is only false association that causes ego. And when that false knot is removed, what remains is the pure sense of existence. And in that pure sense of existence, there is no bondage. There is only that pure sense of existence. And that is the essence of our true being, as already seen in every verse. So with this, we conclude this section, verse 26, which again brings us to the same ground of recognition, that all that one needs to therefore do is to simply be still. See, all of this points out to two simple words, which is be still. That's why Ramana Maharshi always was fond of saying Summa iru, means in Tamil, be still. That is, not be still outwardly. One can engage in whatever activities one has to engage in, but inwardly, if we remain still, that is to say, not identify with the movement of the body and the mind as I, then what remains is just the pure sense of existence. And that pure sense of existence is our true nature. So we don't have to do anything. In fact, we just have to stop doing inwardly. We are always moving inwardly. saying, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to practice this technique, I have to practice that technique, I have to, 100 different things. All that is pointed to here is you don't need to do a thing. You just have to stop identifying with this sense of doing and recognize the being that is ever free. And it doesn't seem so easy for us because we are always prone to doing. So, as I was telling someone yesterday, we are human beings, but we act like human doings. So, the human being is lost because we are always identified with doing. Once we recognize that we are human being, then we are free. So that is the whole pointer of all these verses. And with this, we'll conclude this session. And any questions we'll take. We have still half an hour. We finished in 1 hour, so it's a beautiful section.
Connected to anything, then our ego will come.
Correct. See the.
So that's why we are getting ego. So
correct.
If we are getting angry or something, that means we are connected to that thing.
Right. So yeah. So the pointer is whenever we are connected to something, there is ego. Okay. So when we remain as the detached witness, we can say, the one who watches everything, then there is no ego. So when I'm simply, even that's why it is not something that one has to close one's eyes and do alone. Even while I'm engaging in activities, whatever it is, if I can remain aware, and that awareness is our presence itself. So that is to say, not attach with anything, not connect with anything, but simply remain aware. Then we can see the freedom in that. If someone says you are a moron, that doesn't affect you as long as you don't identify with someone that who's not a moron. So there is just the whole reason why we are so subject to events and people and all the rest is because we are attached to something. We are connected with something, some form, internal or like internal meaning mental or physical or relations or any of that. If we simply watch everything, so that is why all it takes is alertness. It's not that don't be attached can again sound like another thing to do, but that's not the real pointer. The real pointer is be aware of your attachment.
So we have to keep asking questions ourselves.
Be aware of it, that's all. You don't have to even ask anything verbally. So let's say if someone, as I said, insults you, if you are aware that you are feeling insulted, normal tendency is to react immediately. How dare he insult me? Or if someone praises you, which is even worse, you feel so good about it, right? But that's why they say flattery is actually worse than insult, because it goes straight to the head, and one gets boosted. So if you are aware that there is something getting flattered or getting insulted, then that awareness removes the connection. Then you notice that there is the identification with the body or with the mind or with some idea, and that is getting either stoked or getting dinged. And when you recognize this, then instantly recognize that the sense of awareness is not affected by it. And that becomes your ground. Then you are aware, and then it just goes. So that takes that alertness. That's why. So that's why Summa or be still is not a state of being idle. It is intense alertness. In many places, Ramana Maharshi says, being still is intense activity. It seems very paradoxical, but that's the essence of it. Being still is intense activity because it takes intense alertness to be still. Otherwise, you are pulled into false identification, into connection with form, and thereby lost in it. So you have to be intensely alert and thereby remain still.
So does the being aware of like what like follow up with the question, right? That if somebody is mad, that you don't. So it is a multi-step process. So it becomes from a, as you keep doing it from a multi-step process, it becomes like a something which is just
Why do you say multi-step?
like when you say, okay, what am I feeling? This is what I'm feeling, and who is feeling that, and then you're walking yourself through it, right? Or
Yes.
does it become like the more you abide in your in yourself that it becomes a seamless process without having to be a multi-step process, or is it each time that
See, there's no steps here actually, right? Because all you are pointing to, all that you are asked here by this pointer is, all we need to do is to recognize within us the sense of presence, which is aware of whatever is happening in terms of thought, feeling, emotion, everything. That's all. When anything rises, any thought rises, feeling rises, the stronger the thought, the stronger the feeling, the more the need to be alert. That is for sure. But there is no steps here, because the only thing we need to do is remain intensely alert to recognize that the pure sense of existence is the only reason this insult or this flattery or this high or low is all perceived. And that pure sense of existence itself is unaffected by it.
but that is a process, right? You need to use your mind for that.
You need to be alert. That's all. It's not that you're using, or we can say use your mind to turn within. That's why in the last verse we saw Madiye Ulle Madaki, right? Like you're turning the mind towards its source. You're not learning anything new here. You're not practicing any technique or anything. You're just remaining alert to the fact that your very source of existence is unaffected by anything that comes and goes. So, in that sense, you can say that you are turning the mind within. You are recognizing with an alert, vigilant presence that this is happening in me, it is happening to me, and I am the presence in which this is happening. And the pure presence that I am is not affected by anything. And that pure presence is unchanging, unmoving, untouched. That is what you are. Because of false identification, we take ourselves to be the changing, the moving, all the rest. So to decouple from it is awareness, is alertness, is the recognition, all of it. And the more we are alert and aware, the more we go to the very same ground of pure awareness, which is open and aware of everything that comes and goes. And that open awareness in which everything comes and goes remains untouched. It's like the space in the room is untouched by whether we move the furniture in or out. So we have to recognize the very space in which everything comes and goes is my true essence. And that is the only recognition that's needed. But that has to be an alert, aware presence every moment. So we cannot sleepwalk through life. Then we are pulled into these identifications and we get either angry or sad or depressed or happy and all the rest. If we remain very alert and aware, then we remain as the pure space of being in which everything comes and goes, and then they are put in their right place. So the question is, what is Dvaita? What is Visishta Dvaita? What is Advaita? It's a very big topic, and we are not going to go into that. And we already saw that all these philosophies ultimately are only to be discarded, because it's only if the mind that gets into this. But a general understanding is good enough. And all this points to is that we have to, if we are identified with the body and mind as I, then there is Dvaita, obviously, because there is duality. There is duality in body and mind, because I am separate I am perceiving the world, and I'm therefore positing that the world must have a creator, and therefore I have a sense of reverence for the creator. So that is duality, Dvaita, which results in bhakti. And in fact, many religions are in Dvaita. Practically speaking, all Abrahamic religions are Dvaita, because they do not, they have some hint of it. When they speak of the Holy Spirit, they come to Christianity, at least comes a little bit to a recognition of the Holy Spirit in the heart. But in general, Abrahamic religions, for instance, are in Dvaita, and that's found even in Vedic tradition in some various strands, whether it's Vaishnavism or Shaivism, they all have Dvaitic variants. And there it is only the recognition of this sense that there is a creator for this creation, and I am part of this creation, and I am this body mind, and this whole universe is vast, and I am an infinitesimal small entity. Therefore, I have reverence for this entity, and that creates humility and devotion, and that is right to that extent. But if we go further into it, we come upon Vishishtatvaita, which is that the very sense of my existence is part of the divine, because the very spark of consciousness in my heart is also created by the same creator. So, one of the ways in which we can understand is when I had this discussion with one Christian person, a preacher of some kind, and he said, um, God is like a potter, right? Just as a potter makes pots. That's the idea of many in Abrahamic religions. But the question is, where does the material for pot making come to God? So, in the case of a potter, it comes from outside him. But if I am the Almighty Creator, then if I'm making you, I have to make you also out of my essence. So, right there we come to Visishta Advaita, and we recognize that the entire creation is coming forth only from the same essence as God. So the spark of consciousness within the heart of everyone is the same essence that is the supreme consciousness, which is the divine who has brought forth everything. So that is Visishtadvaita. And then when we recognize that the supreme consciousness that is all pervading in reality is indivisible, because only matter can be divided. Actually, consciousness cannot be divided. So the idea that consciousness is individuated is only because we are still having the seed of that sense I am, that is not recognizing the indivisible nature of consciousness. That is why it is important to abide in it, to recognize it. Because as we said, words can have difference, but silence cannot have difference. So your speech and my speech are different. But your silence and my silence, can they be different? There's only one silence. So Vishishtadvaita is the recognition that there is silence in you, there is silence in me. And both silence are part of the universal silence. That is what Vishishtadvaita says. It is a part-whole relationship. The part, therefore, serves the whole, is what they say, which is very true. But then Advaita is the last step, which says, but where is the part?
So when you say step, so are these evolutionary? So
No,
the
just
Dvaita is
philosophy.
at the like first level, which is where most people are, and then maybe the Vishishta Dvaita, and then the. So in other words, can salvation only be attained by Advaita, or can it also be attained by just Dvaita?
Yeah, so the question is salvation only possible for Advaita, not for Dvaita or Visishtadvaita? So it's not, see, here is the thing. Um, the important recognition, as we saw in fact one of the earlier verses, is the loss of ego is salvation, right? That is salvation. When we recognize that I am not a separate entity and all there is only Bhagavan, is salvation. That can come for one who is in Dvaita, who is purely in the mood of service. And that can be completely not reachable for one who is having the highest understanding of Advaita because he's caught in the understanding.
Sorry, say that again, last part.
So, Dvaita and Advaita we spoke about. The loss of ego is the essence of all religion. Because when the ego is lost, when the false identity is lost, then what remains is the supreme essence, which is Bhagavan. If I take myself to be the body mind and I take the creator to be separate from me, but I am so sincere in that devotion, I'm serving with heart and soul in that devotion, and because I'm so consumed in that service that without even my intent, I lose myself. Many people have this experience. For example, if you are in Nama Sankirtan, you are taking the holy name, you don't have any conception of Advaita, you're singing Harinam, and you have so much love in your heart, and the very sense of separation goes away without even knowing Advaita. On the other hand, someone can know Advaita top to bottom, front to back, read all the Upanishads, all the so called Prakarana Granthas and Prasthanatraya and all the rest, but caught in the understanding, the sense of knowing everything, and still unable to lose that because of the intellectual understanding acting as a golden cage for the ego. Because I am now feeling like I know everything and I am the knower, and the ego is developed because of that. So, to answer your question directly, that's why Ramana Maharshi says always when someone came and asked him about these things, he said, every philosophy agrees that surrender of the ego is the meaning of salvation. So, surrender your ego and forget about philosophies.
Okay, that makes sense actually.
Yeah.
That is the main thing. But it's good to understand, you see, because you come at it over
Correct.
years from various things, so you end up
Correct.
getting confused,
Correct.
right? As we have more
Correct.
more philosophies.
So now you understand everything in terms of all the other philosophies too. So the earlier question there was what about things like karma and all that? That's all applicable only from the perspective of the body mind. So as I am identified with the body mind, there is karma, there is apparent cause and effect, and there is all the rest. And that is true at that level. But when one is recognizing the true non-dual nature, and that is true as we just now pointed out, that can be true even for one who doesn't know anything about Advaita. If one is fully surrendered, even through this apparent Dvaita Bhava, he comes to the same recognition that everything is Bhagavan. Then there is no individual to have karma. Ego, see, karma is only for the ego. So, ego, because ego is fictitious, karma is also fictitious.
Okay.
It is only an apparent reality. Karma seems to be real because ego seems to be real. It is like how the character in the movie seems to go through cause and effect, but in reality, it's all just there is only the screen of awareness. So as long as we take ourselves to be the character, there is the karma, there is all the rest. So the direct pointer is therefore, to put it in different ways, lose yourself, right? Empty yourself, and that can be done through pure surrender or pure direct perception of the truth. So that is why Ramana Maharshi, for instance, always said that bhakti and jnana are one and the same. We don't need to differentiate between the two. Both are one and the same, because if I have the pure devotion that loses the sense of me in that love, as so many great devotees have exemplified, they are in that greatest state of salvation, whereas scholars of Advaita are not in that. So
because they have ego about knowing that.
because they have ego about knowing it, exactly. So it's not about knowing, but it's about being again. So self-inquiry, as Ramana Maharshi has revealed, is only making it very clear so that we can use the mind and the intellect to turn within. So that is why it is not Vedanta, but it is Atma Jnana. So the question is, does Vedantic meditation help increase our alertness? Yes, certainly. Because Vedantic meditation is exactly only pointing to the simple truth that Brahman alone exists, truth alone exists, right? In Vedanta, we have Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Shravana is to listen to this truth. Manana is to reflect upon it. Nididhyasana is to meditate upon it and abide in it. And so, certainly, the more we can't, so the three things that are there, which are really actually one if we do it with full attention, but they can seem like three steps. So, listening is Shravana, then Manana is to contemplate upon it, and Nididhyasana is to abide by it, meditate upon it. And when we listen, reflect, and meditate upon it, then the mind clears itself of false identification through that process as well. And thereby it remains alert, and thereby it frees itself of getting caught up in all these egoic movements and remaining alert. So as we saw in no, we are yet to see the one of the verses coming up where Ramana Maharshi says that that is an indirect aid. He says to say that I am Brahman and to read Vedanta is an aid, but it's an indirect aid. The direct way is what we just saw, which is to go into the very source of our existence and surrender it completely. But Vedantic study can help because that only points to the same truth. The only caveat there is, as which is tying back to the earlier question, is it can also create an identification with the knowledge. So one can thereby gain a new identity as a Vedantic scholar or a Vedantic student and all the rest. So many Vedantic experts are there, and very clearly they themselves acknowledge right away that they don't have the realization. So Vedantic knowledge is an aid if it's put in the right place. But that's why Ramana Maharshi, for example, many times he said to people, don't bother with it if you can do the inquiry directly. Kunju Swami came and asked him, one famous devotee of him, should I go and study Upanishads? He said, Ramana Maharshi said, you will say, I want to study Upanishads. Then you will say, for that I need to study Nyaya. Then for that you say, I'll need to learn Sanskrit. When will you actually do inquiry? So that is the direct pointer of the great sages. So don't bother with it. Just go directly into the source. You are. There is no question about it. Find out the nature of that very truth. You don't need any book for that. We don't need any pointer for that. We can, even this book is only pointing to the simple truth. But when we make it a system of knowledge and have a coursework and have multiple books and do all the rest, then it becomes another activity for the ego to acquire. The acquisitive mindset of the ego is always in work. So, see, this one something very important to recognize is that the mind identified as ego always likes to acquire to sustain itself. And it's either acquiring wealth or acquiring family or acquiring possession, or it acquires knowledge. So I say I want to know more. Oh, I have to learn Prakarana Granthas. I have to learn Bhashyas. I have to learn Tikas. There is no end
Or
to that.
even meditation, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to stay in, you're trying to you want to acquire that next state. Like you're looking for that. Like, okay, what
Correct.
happens next?
So the acquisitive mindset is something again you have to be very careful of. So the direct pointer therefore is Vedantic meditation. It can be very helpful if rooted in the guidance of the direct pointer of Ramana Maharshi or the great sages like Ramana Maharshi. Otherwise, it can become an academic exercise. So, as long as we are anchored in self inquiry and surrender, then Vedantic meditation can be of help, suddenly. See, salvation is a very fancy word. It's just basic. Yeah, you can say that. But
realization,
right, realization. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine. Whatever word we use, it's just a simple recognition of living free of any false identification and thereby living truly with love and peace and all that. And that is certainly available as long as one is sincere in any way. Um, so, yeah, karma and all this is only at the level of the body mind, and it can be rebirth. All these concepts are only there as long as we take the body mind to be real. So that's why every time Ramana Maharshi was asked, what do you, it's a very interesting question, but some people will get frustrated. But it's a very powerful question. People will say, um, what about my last birth or next birth? And he would say, find out first now if you are born now. So we assume and presume that I am here as a separate entity identified with the body mind, and therefore I talk about the past birth or next birth. That very core assumption has to be examined. That is self inquiry. If you are in pure surrender, again the question will not rise because it's all Bhagavan's will. He'll take me wherever he takes me. That's all. In fact, there's a beautiful prayer of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu where he says, Mama Janma Janmani Jagadishware Bhavatat Bhakti Ahetuki. He says, take me wherever you take me. Just give me causeless love for you. So that's pure devotion. Then there is no concern about that either. Such a beautiful verse. Ahetuki. Bhavatat Bhaktir Ahetuki.